We'll go ahead and get started. Just want to welcome everybody to our Georgia Grown webinar series. Today we're going to be talking about the Georgia Domestic Marketing Program. And then our next webinar will be on SESTA and international kind of things, and that'll be in August. Go ahead and get familiar with the chat features. If you want to put something in the chat, feel free to do that. And then we also have a Q&A section as well. So if you have any questions as we're going through things, feel free to pop those down below. This webinar will be recorded, and the presentation will also be sent out along with the recording after the conclusion of the webinar. It should be sent out this afternoon. Again, any questions that you have, just feel free to put those down below. And today's topic, like I mentioned, is going to be leveraging Georgia Grown's domestic marketing program, and that will be presented by our business development team, which is Sarah Cook and Liz Danforth. So guys, go ahead and take it over.
Thank you, Lizzie. We're happy to be here and talk about our domestic marketing program. But people always ask why we do this, and it basically boils down to 5 keywords. Agriculture makes Georgians' lives better. So it's our job to help our companies grow outside the state of Georgia, and the domestic marketing program is one of those key ways that we support our companies as they grow their businesses outside of basically just their backyard, their own little bubble. So they're growing regionally and across the country, and this is one way we make that happen. So, like I said, we're pushing product out from the state of Georgia all across the country with our domestic marketing program. And we're not just in the Southeast, we truly are all the way across the country. Some of our shows are as far as California and New York. And so you'll get to hear a little bit about each of those trade shows and how they might be applicable to your company. And we're going to kind of give you like a basic introduction of each show to kind of help you evaluate utilizing the domestic marketing program to grow your business. So let's talk a little bit about what the domestic marketing program is. So we have an allotment of funding from the Georgia legislature that is set aside to help us support companies grow their businesses outside the state of Georgia. And we do that by supporting trade show costs. We are not a grant program, but we can support a specific list of trade shows. We have a list, and we'll kind of walk through those with you. And with those, we pay the trade shows directly for a portion of the booth space for you to exhibit at those trade shows. And the idea is for you to get in front of buyers and potential companies to partner with. And we want you to be able to get there. And we know that you all have a lot of skin in the game by shipping products cross country, by traveling. So we don't support any of those costs. We pay a portion of your booth cost for the trade shows directly. Now, our program launches on July 1st. Every member of Georgia Grown will get an email to that effect saying that applications have begun to be accepted on July 1st. And we're going to push that out through our social media. Of course, anybody that's applied for the program in the past will get a reminder email as well. And you have a good 2 months to get your application into us. It's a simple Google form that you complete that asks questions about what your current marketing strategy is, what you're hoping to achieve by growing domestically to different shows. And we always tell people it shouldn't take you more than 30 or 45 minutes at the most. This is not a in-depth grant program where you have to supply dozens of pages of documentation. We're really just trying to get an understanding of your company, where you are and where you hope to go. And that information helps Liz and I decide how to allocate our funding to the various shows, how many companies we can support at different shows, and who's actually the most market ready. So that's really what the application is designed for, is to help us understand market readiness and help us allocate our funding. So you apply for the program via that form by September 1st. And on September 1st, Liz and I meet, and we have a grading matrix that we utilize to understand who is the most market ready. And of course, some people apply for shows that they're not a good fit for. And so we immediately move those to the bottom of the list. But we look at the amount of money we have allocated for each show, and we kind of rank everybody and start from the top down. And really that's how it works. We always encourage people to apply for shows that they might be interested in. And if they're not quite ready to pull the trigger, you all have the opportunity, when we let you know what shows you've been approved for, you have the opportunity to say, I was a little overzealous when I applied. I've been approved for 3 shows, but I think realistically I can do 2. So there's a little bit of a grace period in that timeline that allows you, before you fully lock in, to commit to a show. So we encourage people, when you're applying, check the boxes on all of the shows that you think would be a good fit, because some of the shows may be oversubscribed and have a long waiting list. Some of the shows may be more readily available because they're less applied for. So take that into consideration. When you apply for our program, you're not locking yourself in immediately. Liz and I will circle back with you to get you locked in and to confirm that you're actually getting the funding and you're actually going to be at a trade show. So one of the questions we get sometimes is, what if I want a show that's not listed? So we have kind of curated the shows that we support. There's hundreds of trade shows all across the US for a variety of different industries and markets. And we just administratively can't spread ourselves across dozens or hundreds of trade shows. So we kind of narrowed it down to roughly a dozen different shows. But we strongly encourage you. There's a question box at the end of the application. This something along the lines of, is there anything else we need to know to make our decision? And please let us know if there are other shows that you would like for us to consider in the future. You can shoot us an email. You'll be provided our contact information at the end of the webinar. And usually if we get enough interest, we will add a show after we have some time to evaluate if it's a good fit for our members. We have one new show this year that we've implemented after beta testing it last year with just a few members, and you'll hear about that later. So if there's a show you're interested in that is not listed on our kind of ready-made list, please let us know. The likelihood of it happening this year is slim, but Liz and I can work toward incorporating it for future years if it's a good fit. Again, like I said, when you apply for the program, you're not contracting yourself for these trade shows. You're not guaranteeing yourself a spot, but you're also not locking yourself in. So what if your plans change? Well, we have a gracious time frame. So this program is for all of the trade shows that will occur in 2026. So you're making 2026 decisions mid 2025, and we know things change. We know that, family members are getting married and they schedule wedding dates that overlap with trade shows. But things like that usually don't happen in a short period of time. You usually have plenty of notice. So if you give us a heads up that you have a change of plans, or you have a conflict, or your business model has shifted, we will be happy to work with you to accommodate that. And there's usually a waiting list for each show, so we will certainly be happy to move on to the next folks. But again, it's just common courtesy. If you give us enough notice, usually we can slide somebody in. But if you call us up 2 weeks before a trade show and say, hey, my daughter's getting married in 2 weeks, I can't be there, that's when it is more of an issue, and it will negatively impact you for future funding. It also hurts our program because it's our job to show a return on our investment. We have to show the state of Georgia that we're making a good investment in companies, and that they're doing what they say they're doing, we're doing what we say we're doing, and that everybody is participating. So we want it to be successful, and that dings our program, and it might jeopardize our funding in the future. So we try to have serious folks at these shows. We try to have them full as possible, to the extent that it makes sense, and we try to work with everybody and give you all as much notice as possible. We will talk a little bit about deposits. If you look at our domestic marketing program manual, you'll see that certain shows have deposits, and Liz will address those towards the end of the presentation. But the bottom line is some of these shows, the state of Georgia has to buy up blocks of space in order to have a pavilion with everybody together. And so we have to pay for the booths outright even a year in advance. So there are a few shows that Liz will touch on that require deposits. So look for that information in just a few minutes.
So next, we're going to talk about just a few simple requirements that we require in order for you to participate in the domestic marketing program. The first one is you must be a paid Georgia Girl member. So if you're on this webinar right now, more than likely you are already a paid member. But if you're not and you're showing this video to a neighbor of yours, in order to sign up for a member to be a member, you can go to georgiagrown.com and sign up to become a member there online. We are a membership based on your sales, so you do have to choose which option is based to your company. And then after that, you will be hearing from our membership coordinator. Her name is Cheryl Smith, and she will be reaching out to you, letting you know of all of the member benefits, and then you can kind of go from there. The next requirement is you must use the Georgia Grown logo on your packaging materials. We strongly encourage for you to use it on like your brochures or your business cards, or have the Georgia Grown logo at your booth, whatever show you're exhibiting at. We just highly encourage you to use it on those different types of marketing materials, like your banner ups, things like that. But it is a requirement for you to use it on your packaging materials at least. And then on this slide, we have listed that stickering is okay for the first year. So we're not going to expect for you to have to throw out all of your packaging material, all of your brochures, different things like that, even if it doesn't have the Georgia Grown logo on there. So like we mentioned, it is okay for the first year for you to put a little Georgia Grown sticker on your packaging materials, because we're not going to expect for you to throw out all of that right at once, because we certainly don't want you to lose out on any money. And then the last requirement is we do ask for you to fill out a survey. Nobody wants to ever see the word survey, but we promise it does not take long. It only takes just a couple of minutes. So say you participate in 2 domestic marketing trade shows of ours. After you exhibit at this show, shortly after, you will receive a survey from us, and it just asks you questions like, was this show successful for me? Or did you meet any notable buyers at the show? Kind of simple questions like that. And it's very important for you to fill out that survey, because we do receive this funding each year. And we turn in those surveys for those people to kind of analyze them. But just a few simple requirements. So now we're going to kind of get into the meat of things. Sarah and I are going to kind of take turns talking about each of the domestic marketing trade shows that we provide funding for. So this first one is America's Mart, and it's held in Atlanta, Georgia, each year. There's actually 2 America's Mart shows. So there's a winter and a summer show. So they're normally held in January and in July each year, but that kind of varies. Um, and this is, so you're allowed to write orders at this show, but we mainly encourage you to exhibit at this show just to have a presence at the show, and exposure to the buyers that attend this show. So the buyers that do attend this show are normally buyers seeking to buy products for like their boutiques or gifty retail shops. One thing about this show is if you are new to the wholesale world, this is a show that you're going to want to attend and it be your first show that you attend. So, a lot of our Georgia Girl members who are new to wholesale, they attend this show first out of all of the other shows. So, America's Mart is a good show to kind of get your foot in the door and just to kind of gain that experience. So, at America's Mart, we have a lot of gourmet foods companies attend this show under our Georgia Grown umbrella. But we do have some different categories like Made in America, Body and Soul, Tabletop, High Design. But the majority of our companies that exhibit with us at this show are gourmet foods companies. Um, so there are some steps for each show, and we'll kind of mention for this one in particular. You do have to fill out a contract for the show, and that is through America's Mart. And with that contract, you are agreeing to all of their guidelines and rules and their deadlines for payments, etc. So you must fill out the contract, and then you also have to pay a deposit as well through and to America's Mart. Um, and then with that, you do get to pick your own booth space as well. So, with all of this, you will work with a show manager. Her name is Donna, and she is fabulous to work with. She makes it an awesome experience. And then you'll, of course, work with Sarah and I as well. And we all kind of hold your hand and help you along through this process because we do understand that for some of you, this is a new experience, and we want to help you through the process. Um, and speaking of it being a lot of gourmet foods companies that exhibit at this show, a lot of y'all, if you're in the gourmet food category, a lot of y'all are together. You may not be right beside each other, or you could be right beside each other, but you're normally all around the same area. We don't necessarily have like a whole Georgia grown pavilion or section, but you're all kind of in the same area where you're beside each other. Um, and then we do a couple of fun things for this show. So one thing is we do a first look lobby display, and as pictured on this slide below Sassy Mustard's picture, this is the first look lobby display that we do. It kind of varies each year. We kind of try to change it up a little bit. But what this is if you're exhibiting at this show, we will grab one or two of your products and we will place it on the display. And then in front of your product, we will put your booth space number. And then we also have a shopper's guide as well, where we list all of the Georgia grown companies that are exhibiting with us at this show. And then beside their name is their booth space number as well. And we've had a lot of great feedback from doing this. We've even had some companies say that they had buyers come up to them and said that they walked by the display, saw their company and were interested in it, and their booth space number was right there beside it, and they went straight to their booth. So, a lot of great feedback and success from doing this display. And we don't do this at every show, but we are fortunate to be able to do it at America's Mart since it is held right here in our home state. And then the last fun thing that we do for this show is Georgia Grown floor stickers. So in front of your booth, America's Mart, they will place a sticker in front of your booth, and it has the Georgia Grown logo or just says Georgia Grown on it. And it helps you stick out compared to some other companies. So it just kind of adds a little something extra for our Georgia Grown members, and they all really love that as well. You can do samples at this show. I think I forgot to mention that, but you are allowed to pass out samples at this show. And then the last thing I wanted to add for this show is this is kind of like a show that we recommend that you exhibit at first and kind of put your foot in the door. Before you do that, we do highly recommend that you walk the show first before you exhibit at the show, just so you can kind of get a feel of how the show is and you're kind of prepared You get to see other exhibitors, other displays set up, and you're kind of prepared on for when you do exhibit at the show. So it is free to be able to do that. You just go online to America's Mart and you can sign up to become a buyer. And like I said, it's free, and we highly recommend that you do that. Okay. The next show that I'll talk about is the Sweets and Snacks Expo. And it is actually happening right now as we speak. It's happening this week. So, as as it's mentioned, explanatory pretty much, there's a lot of sweets and snacks companies that exhibit at this show. For example, you've got a lot of the bigger companies like M&M's and Nerds and Sour Patch Kids and Jack's Links, Beef Jerky, things like that. But then you've also got smaller companies like your company that exhibit at this show, revolving around sweets and snacks products. So, like America's Mart, this is a show that you can write orders at, but it's mainly a show for you to exhibit at just to have a presence at and connect with the buyers there. Um, and then for this show in particular, we don't really have a whole Georgia grown pavilion or a Georgia section. You're able to pick your own booth space for this show, and that's just due to logistic reasons. So you will work with a show manager for this show as well and choose your own booth space. And of course, we're not going to leave you out there hanging out there high and dry. We're going to be able to kind of help you choose which space may work best for you. So, for example, Sarah and I have been to all of these shows, or at least one of us has been to a show before, and we kind of know what they're like, right? So, for this show, for example, there is a big hall or a big room, so to say, that has a lot of the bigger companies in there, like M&M's and Sour Patch Kids, and they have really huge booths. They're very impressive, but connecting to that hall or room is booths like yours. So your typical 10 by 10 booth um, with a business like yours. And so you're not lost in between all of the big exhibits as well. But in between some of those big booths, that's not to say that there are not some 10 by 10s, because there are. So I say all of that because Sarah and I have walked these shows before, and we kind of know the ins and out, and we know if you'll be able to, or we know if your company may be a good fit for this show. I think I've covered that one.
Awesome. Um, before I talk about the National Restaurant Show, Liz has mentioned things a few times, and I want to bring that out because this is another show that's similar. So you'll see on the slides, it said this is a primarily an exposure show with lead generation. What that means is, like Liz said, you might write an order or two on site with a buyer if they're just absolutely blown away. But more than likely, you're going to be capturing contact information of potential buyers, and you won't see those orders become realized for 6 to 12 months. So, when we say that it's an exposure show with lead generation, we want you to understand that you are going to take longer to recoup your investment of traveling, of exhibiting, shipping products. It's going to take longer before you realize sales from those shows. So consider that when you're thinking about your cash flow situation. With America's Mart, those orders might be written on site or, within a month or two of the America's Mart show. And so you'll start getting products shipped to those buyers much more quickly than for these exposure shows. And we really want to temper your expectations. We don't want to put you in a bind for cash flow and realize it's going to take you up to a year to eventually make all your money back. Some of these shows, the buyers want to see you more than one time before they'll actually place an order with you. So it may even take 1 or 2 or 3 times exhibiting before you really start to see that noticeable difference driving your sales. So just keep that in mind. with that being said, let's talk about the National Restaurant Show. It's held in Chicago, Illinois. It is actually next week, and it used to be co-located with the Sweets and Snacks Expo. Sweets and Snacks moved to Indianapolis. So the National Restaurant Show in Chicago will actually be next week. So it's usually in May. And again, this is an exposure show where you are going to be meeting food service buyers. And food service is different than wholesale retail buyers. So retail buyers may be looking at buying case quantities of individual serving sizes like you would buy in a grocery store. At the restaurant show, these are going to be food service quantities. So these are caterers, restaurateurs, commissaries. They're looking, and while they certainly might consider buying a typical 12-ounce bottle of barbecue sauce to place on every table in their restaurant, they're going to be looking for gallon sizes. They're going to be looking for food service packaging that's easy to open for chefs to utilize your sauces in their kitchens. So you're looking at a really different kind of packaging. You're not looking as much at retail packaging. I always tell people when they come to this show, go ahead and bring both. It can't hurt to bring individual size bottles and your food service packaging. Definitely bring both, but understand that these are people that are going to be buying in large quantities, and they don't want to have to open 12-ounce bottles when they can just open up 1-gallon jug. So that's what we mean when we say it's a food service show. And the buyers you'll find may be independent restaurateurs that only have 1 or 2 restaurants. They might have small chains that have 8 or 9 restaurants in a small region, all the way up to some of the national chains where, Applebee's and Chili's and TGI Fridays and the U.S. Army commissary buyers will come through. So it's a wide variety. A lot of those smaller individual caterers and restaurateurs. They're there to see what the latest and greatest is for restaurants. And the great thing is, and you can see from the photo, our booths are in a specified area. So it's a Georgia pavilion in the Taste of the States Pavilion. So we're with other state groups that are clustered by state. So, there's power in numbers. So you have a lot of other smaller exhibitors in 10 by 10 booths. And NASDA, which is the organization that puts this on, provides a chef in the trade show to do chef demos with products. So they're utilizing our company's products in food demonstrations, which is great. That always attracts buyer traffic. Also bringing in, special groups of buyers to come in. They have facilitators that'll bring in, like I said, the Army commissary buyers or, concessionaires for Major League Baseball parks, things like that. So it's really interesting to see the foot traffic in the Taste of the States Pavilion, because this is such a very large show. And in other parts of the show, you may just have 7 or 8 different suppliers of plates and napkin dispensers and pizza ovens. And so to get into the section where all the good food is actually being prepared is exciting for the buyers. Um, Again, we pay $2,500 towards your booth, but this is one of those shows when Liz talks about deposits that you'll actually pay a deposit to us because we have to pay for it in full to start with.
The Summer Fancy Food Show, it's held in New York each year, and there is actually a Winter Fancy Food Show, but we just participate and provide funding for the Summer Fancy Food Show. It's a super fun show. It's normally held in June or July. And again, like Sarah mentioned, you're kind of just there just to have a presence and connect with the buyers at this show. We do have a Georgia pavilion at this show. It's in the USA Pavilion. But you can either choose to be in the Georgia pavilion or you can choose your own location outside of the pavilion, and outside of the USA Pavilion as well. Normally our members choose to exhibit in our Georgia Pavilion because they all kind of like to be right there together. But it's definitely your choice and what you think your company will be best at. So for example, in our Georgia pavilion this year, we have about 13 members in our pavilion. Um, Sometimes we have 20 members in our pavilion. It just kind of varies. Um, we have a awesome show manager again for this show as well that we work with, and you'll work with them closely. Because there are a couple of requirements for this show, unlike some of the other shows. Um, so the two requirements is one, you must be a paid member of their Specialty Foods Association. It's $400. And then you also must send your product in for review as well. It's called Rutgers Review, and you have to mail your product in for them to approve it for you to be able to exhibit at the show. But I don't want that to scare you because number one, we can help you with that. And then you also have a great show manager that you can work with as well for that. And we can just kind of walk you through those steps. But we also haven't ever had a member get turned down and their product not been approved. So those are just a couple of requirements for this show. But the kind of companies that exhibit at this show, it's a wide variety of like gourmet foods companies, of course. Sweets and snacks companies. We've got some beverage companies like coffee companies that attend this show, or kind of like your new sodas that attend this show and things like that. So, like I said, it's a wide variety. Um, and we have a great show manager to work with. And the last thing I think that I wanted to mention for this show is, and Sarah and I haven't really talked about this, but a lot of questions we get is people ask what's included in my booth, especially if you're new to exhibiting at the shows. And sometimes it varies. But for this show in particular, a 6 foot table is included. Sometimes carpet is included, and it is for this show, and that definitely helps with padding because some shows it's just like concrete floors. Um, and then for this show as well, you get 2 chairs and then 2 badges that come with your booth. Sometimes shows include like pipe and draping, and things like that. And so, like I said, it varies, but that is a question that we get asked a lot, and that's kind of like your typical setup for a booth. You're on mute, Sarah.
I was just talking about how I'm a Zoom expert, and then I do that. Moving on, we have Natural Products Expo West, and I would say that this is by far the largest show that we support. It takes up the entirety of the Anaheim Convention Center and then some. It takes up 2 other hotel ballrooms. So this is by far and away the largest show that we support. But Natural Products Expo West is usually held in early spring. I actually need to correct this because it's usually in March. I put May, but it's usually in March, and it is held in Anaheim, California. And it targets companies that fit what you would call um, outside of the traditional box. So they are non-preservatives, no artificial colors, any kind of special health benefits. Those are the types of buyers that are at Expo West. They're looking for things that would be a better fit in a Whole Foods, say, or a Trader Joe's. So this is a great opportunity if you have products, and it doesn't have to be kind of what we say crunchy granola. So it can be just a normal product where you don't already use artificial preservatives or things like that. So we have a great pickle company that they just make pickles the traditional way with vinegar and salt and seasonings, and that checks the box for the no artificial ingredients, no artificial preservatives. And so the buyers love that they're getting pickles that don't have food dyes or things like that. Um, so this is a great show. And again, this is one of those shows similar to Sweets and Snacks where there is a big hall and they have giant companies like Mrs. Myers or Bob's Red Mill, and they will have, 40 by 50 displays, giant booths And then there's also smaller halls for first-time exhibitors where you're on a more comparable scale. You have 10 by 10 booths all in a line. So you're not trying to compete with the big flashy displays. So again, when you're thinking about these shows, we'll walk you through that and kind of direct you in certain ways. This is similar in that it's a primarily an exposure show, but the buyers are huge. They range from small health food stores all the way up to major national retail chains. So you may be talking to someone from Liz's health food store one minute, and the next minute, the local foods buyer from Whole Foods might be coming through. Um, Similar to Summer Fancy Foods, you do have to clear standards for the Natural Products Expo. They have standards you have to submit your product and packaging, and they evaluate to make sure that you're not having any claims on your product that violate FDA regulations. So if you say that it is healthy and good for your heart, you have to either have documentation to back that up, or you have to have a claim on there that says this product has not been evaluated by the FDA, that kind of stuff. So you do have to clear their standards. And if you look down at the bottom, it shows Georgia Grown pays a little over $7,000 towards your booth. And a lot of people get excited about that, but this is probably the most costly show that we cover. So these booth spaces are costly to start with, but also think about having to travel all the way to Anaheim, California. It is in the spring, and you can see Disneyland right outside the doors of the convention center. So you're competing with families trying to go to Disneyland on spring break when you're thinking about lodging. So lodging is expensive. They also have labor unions. So any kind of services that you order through the trade show are going to be more costly. So while it looks like we have a lot more skin in the game for a show like Expo West, your costs are going to be proportionately higher as well. So we always try to have people think it through and kind of plan out a budget of what they expect their skin in the game will be. And so with Expo West, because of those factors, it can be a little more costly. Again, transport, travel, things like that. So we want you to take that into consideration when you're applying for shows, that they're not just a good fit for the audience and for your type of product, but they're also a good fit in terms of your investment for that show. The next show that we have that we cover is called America's Food and Beverage. It is held in Miami, Florida. It is usually in the early fall in September. And I like to call this show Export Light. So this show is in Miami. It attracts a lot of buyers from the Southeast, but it also attracts a lot of buyers from the Caribbean, Mexico, Central American and South American countries. So if you are even thinking about dipping your toe in the water and considering exporting your product, America's Food and Beverage is a great opportunity for you, because a lot of these buyers have what we call freight forwarders. They will buy a product from you or place an order for a product from you, and you will ship it to their location in Miami. So it's just like you're selling to our neighbors in South Carolina or Alabama. You're shipping product to Miami, and their freight forwarders are handling all of the ins and outs of the export paperwork. They will consolidate all of the products they order into containers. And so you're reaching an international market, a little bit different market than traditional shows, but you don't have to do the homework of going through export paperwork and things like that. Again, this is an exposure show, so you're less likely to write orders on site. Um, and when I say that, please understand the secret to these shows being successful is following up with those buyers, taking good notes, understanding what they might be interested in, and giving them a call in a few months and saying, "Hey, I met you at America's Food and Beverage. You mentioned you're interested in these types of sauces, and we connected. Can I send you my sales sheet again? Can I send you a sample?" Things like that. So it is a little more legwork post show to follow up on those leads, but really the bigger fish could make a huge impact. Somebody might end up buying a pallet of product from you as opposed to just a few cases. So keep that in mind when we talk about these lead generation shows. We do have a Georgia Pavilion in the Taste of the States. This is the same organization that does the National Restaurant Show. So we have a chef that does demos. You're with other state exhibitors, and we always have our Georgia companies all together. So you will have friends nearby. So if you need to run to the restroom or go grab lunch, it's always good to know your neighbors. And so that's why we love having that Georgia Pavilion there. Um, we pay $2,000 towards the booth. And again, this is a great opportunity for you to meet that market in the Caribbean, Central America, that area. Um, Note for this show, and this is not to scare away some of the higher price products, but the buyers at this show are very value driven. I wouldn't say they're price driven necessarily because they do have some deeper pockets, especially those that have resorts and typically attract tourists. The price is not as much of an issue, but they are looking for value. They're looking for products that meet their consumers' demand, but that make sense for them in their area. So I always say for fancy shows, fancy food show or America's Mart or America's Food and Beverage, you might not be a product that's for everyone, but for everyone, there's a product. So you just have to really identify who your ideal customer is and really be able to understand that you're not going to be right for everybody, but there are buyers there that are looking for your products that have the money to import it or to buy it and stock it in their locations.
The International Gift Expo of the Smokies, we call it IGES because that is a mouthful to say. This show is a little bit different than the others because there's actually two locations for this show happening at the same time. And then this is the show that Sarah mentioned at the beginning too that we just recently added. So last November was the first time we provided funding for about four of our companies to attend that show. And then this November, we're going to have about 20 companies or more attending the show in November. So the majority of our companies attend the Pigeon Forge location. Sarah and I have been to both locations, and we've figured out that the Pigeon Forge location is the best one that fits for majority of our companies. We do have one company that exhibits at the location in Gatlinburg, just due to another reason. But as a lot of the other shows, you can write orders at this show. You can pass out samples at this show, but it's mainly just to have a presence there and to connect with the buyers. This show is a little bit unique and fun and different because, as mentioned on here, it attracts aquariums and zoos and state and national park buyers. So like resort and souvenir and specialty gifts. The buyers in the travel and tourism industries from the US and the Caribbean and Canada, they're looking for high quality original products to be able to sell in their gift stores. So it's a really fun show. We also have a great show manager for this show as well that we work with. And then we have a Made in Georgia section. So we pretty much have our own Georgia grown section at this show where all of our Georgia grown members are side by side together. And we're coming up ways for this show just to kind of highlight Georgia grown even more each year at this show, just because it seems like it's a rapid growing show. I would kind of compare it kind of to America's Mart. Um, it's a little bit cheaper to attend this show compared to some of the shows in California. Um, Especially if you're in the Atlanta or North Georgia area. It's a quick drive to Tennessee. Sarah and I live in South Georgia, and we even drove it. So you're saving money on a plane ticket and things like that. And then I'm also a South Georgia native. So when Sarah and I went to this show, we parked in the parking lot and we were with our companies in 5 minutes. And so it was kind of like a breath of fresh air just to be able to smoothly get in there compared to some of the shows like in California. Um, So it's a very easy show, and our companies really seemed to enjoy it last year. So we're excited to see all of the improvement that'll come for this year. Um, yeah.
Finally, I want to tell you about Newtopia Now. So, Newtopia Now and Natural Products Expo West are coordinated by the same parent company. They both target the natural foods industries, and this is one of our shows that has the smallest presence. It used to be called Expo East, and it used to be held in Philadelphia. And they tried a new model last year. So this show is more about interpersonal connection. So they're focusing less on volume of attendees and really focusing on the quality of attendees. They more highly vet the buyers that attend this show, and they try to cluster products in what they call neighborhoods. So you will have your supplements, you will have your personal care, you'll have your foods, organics, things like that. And they try to cluster all of the companies like with like, so the buyers can really target the companies that are a good fit for them. And they also try to do some matchmaking, some B2B meetings with the buyers ahead of time, get those scheduled with companies. So while you may not see the quantity of traffic coming by your booth, they're hoping that the quality of those connections is more tailored for your company. So I would say this is one of the more advanced shows that we do. I don't recommend people start out with shows like Expo West or Newtopia Now if they're just getting their feet wet in the trade show game. But if you're a more experienced trade company at trade shows, this might be a good option for you. And this is where some of that discernment comes in. We definitely don't want to send you to a show and you kind of be in with the veteran trade show exhibitors, and you're just a rookie trying to figure things out. But this is really good when you're talking about quality of buyers. Um, this is natural products again, and we don't have a Georgia pavilion because we want our companies to be in the neighborhood that makes sense for them. So we don't have a Georgia pavilion. You pick your own space at this show as well. And again, because this is part of the same organization that does Expo West, you do have to submit your product for standards evaluation. If you do both of the shows and you're approved for one, it automatically transfers to the other. So you don't have to repeat that process. So if you participate in Utopia Now and Expo West, you only have to go through that one time. And it's good for I think 18 to 24 months that standards review is. So you don't have to do it every year, just every other year. So this is again a more advanced lead generation show for our more experienced trade show exhibitors.
So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our last two shows that we provide funding for, which is SCPC Southern Exposure, and then the next show is SCPC Southern Innovations. They're very similar, and SCPC stands for Southern or Southeast Produce Council. So these are produce related trade shows. Um, Before I get started on this one too, and before I forget, this show in particular, there is a wait list for this show. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. Southern Exposure is larger than Southern Innovations, which I'll talk about. They're very similar, but they do have some differences. Um, so like I said, mainly produce farms, produce companies exhibit at this show. As you see here on this slide, we have Baker Farms in front of us exhibiting there. And like mentioned on the slide, and a lot of these other shows, that you're just there just to have a presence and connect with the buyers. You pick your own space for these shows. And a lot of our Georgia companies, they do try to kind of exhibit beside each other if it does work out. And then buyers that attend this show are your major retail buyers like Publix and Walmart, Sprouts, and Whole Foods. This show is a little bit different in a way that Georgia Grown pays for your entire booth space cost for this show. However, you have to purchase their bronze sponsorship package, which is $5,000. And the reason for that is because the show pays for the buyers travel costs to come to the show. So that's a little bit different than a lot of the other shows. And then Southern Innovations, very similar to Southern Exposure as far as the companies that exhibit at this show. So normally companies that exhibit at Southern Exposure, they exhibit at Southern Innovations as well. But this show focuses more on food service and organic companies. And like I mentioned, Southern Innovations is a little bit smaller than Southern Exposure, but it is getting on up in there in size, they say, and it is getting a lot bigger, and kind of comparing in size to Southern Exposure. And then the difference with this show compared to Southern Exposure is this show, they like to focus more on like new innovative products, any new research that has come out or any new ways they produced a product, and things like that. So hence the name Southern Innovations. And then the same for this show. We pay for your entire booth space costs, and then you have to purchase that $5,000 sponsorship package.
Okay, so this sounds great. We're from the government, we're here to help, and we have money to pay for your trade show. But really and truly, we want you to think it through. Evaluate the audience of the buyers that are attending. Really understand what your ideal customer is. You know, everyone, when they're first starting out, they have big dreams and they imagine their product on the grocery store shelves. But if they have a highly artisanal product with an extremely high price point, that may not be the best customer for them. So we really want you to identify all the ins and outs of the shows to make sure they're a good fit. Understanding if this is an order writing show like America's Mart, where you might see your return on investment a lot quicker than shows, understanding your cash flow and how long you can wait before you see that return on your investment, understanding the true total cost of the booth, not just the booth space, but your travel, your shipping, any furniture or power rentals. All of those little things add up very quickly. So understanding that just because we pay for half of your booth space, you're not going to get away with just paying $2,000 for a booth space. You're going to see that number jump very quickly when you factor in all of those. And again, estimate the time it takes to recoup your return on investment. Understanding your cash flow situation is important. And we always say, don't buy it just because you have a coupon. Just because it looks like a great deal, just because it's one of those big dreams of yours to be at Summer Fancy Foods. We really don't want you to go to shows when you're not ready. We would rather you wait and make sure that the time is right for the business that you're in, rather than going too soon or to the wrong show and it not being a good fit, because that's really not a good return on your investment or ours. And we don't want you to be there and be unsuccessful. Our job is for you to be successful, to meet with these buyers, the right buyers, and see those connections turn into sales for your company and help grow your company here in the state of Georgia. So just because it looks like a good deal on the onset, please don't go into that blindly. Really take your time and evaluate and make sure these shows are a good fit. And we're going to do our part to look at your responses on your application and do the same.
So throughout our presentation on each slide, we have listed what Georgia Grown or what GDA will pay for your booth space at each show. But this slide just kind of breaks down the whole cost, and this is just for your booth space. So it gets a little bit confusing, and we're going to try to break it down easy for you. But the first column is just your basic booth cost estimate, and this is based off of square footage, and it's based off of this past year's shows on how much the booth space cost at each show. And this does not include electrical, refrigeration, any extra things like that. This is just for the booth space. So if you slip over to the last column, cost share borne by GDA, this is the set amount that we will pay for your booth space at each show. So for example, Natural Products Expo West, we will pay a little over $7,000 for your booth space at that show, which is awesome. So this amount does not change, it does not vary. However, the basic booth space cost estimate, so that first column that I just talked about, that could vary. But the cost that we are able to pay for your booth space, it is just a set amount. So, slipping over to the two middle columns, the orange columns, Sarah mentioned that there was a few shows that we require for you to pay a deposit to us, and that is the Summer Fancy Food Show, America's Food and Beverage Show, and the National Restaurant Show. So for those three shows, we require for you to pay a $500 deposit, and that secures your space because we have to pay for your entire booth space cost up front for each of those shows. Um, and then the remaining balance is due 60 days prior to the date of the show. So for those three shows, the remaining balance you will pay to the Georgia Commodity Commission instead of paying that remaining balance to the show. However, for all of the other shows, as listed in the first orange column, that is the amount that you will pay to the show, and that is for your remaining booth space cost. So, like I said, it does not include anything else except for your booth space, and that's kind of just a breakdown of the cost.
Absolutely. One of the things that Liz mentioned is the basic booth cost estimate may change. And the best example I can think of is, for example, at America's Mart. If you choose a premium booth location like a corner or an end cap, their price per square foot is a little higher than a regular inline booth. So while your booth space might be a little more than $4,300, the Georgia Grown program for domestic marketing will only pay a fixed amount. So we'll pay 2,300, you pay any balance after that. So you're certainly welcome to get a double booth or a special booth like a corner booth, but we will not expand our contribution. One other thing we wanted to just throw this out there, Lizzie mentioned it at the start of the webinar. We are having a webinar in August talking about international trade. So as we get you all over the United States and you conquer the US market, eventually we hope you will grow and want to look at exporting your product all across the globe. Liz and I also manage SUSTA, which is the Southern United States Trade Association for the state of Georgia, and we have funds for that. So if that is something you're interested in considering or just wanting to know more about, please go ahead and plan on coming to our webinar in August. And I know Lizzie might have some questions for us, but we wanted to put our email addresses on here. If you have questions, please reach out to us. Liz and I are happy to help you answer any questions you might have and kind of help you understand the ins and outs and the nuances of these shows.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you guys so much. That was super in-depth and informative. I guess I just want to ask, like, on behalf of everybody, go ahead if any of our attendees have any questions, go ahead and put them in the Q&A section. But for me, so what do you see as the biggest misconception from people that are wanting to apply to the domestic marketing program?
I'll jump in on that one. So I guess that kind of like what I said, just because you have a coupon doesn't mean it's a right fit. So we don't want people to think that they have to jump on an opportunity to attend or exhibit at a trade show because it seems like a great deal. We really want it to be a good fit and we really want you to be successful. So I certainly don't want to discourage anybody from applying, but we really want you to take the decision to be at a trade show seriously.
And I know that you guys talked about this a little bit, but what are the shows that you recommend for somebody who's just getting started?
So that's something that I mentioned at the very beginning, so about an hour ago. And I know we went through a lot of shows, but America's Mart is the show that we recommend first stepping into if you're first stepping into the wholesale world, America's Mart is a great experience for a first time trade show for you. And then you have two options for that show too. So, like I mentioned, there's an America's Mart show in January, and then there's one in July as well. And we have members that exhibit at both of the shows, and we have members that sometimes just exhibit at one of those shows. But America's Mart is a great one to kind of first step into.
Okay, great. To just kind of end us off, can you guys share an example of somebody who used the domestic marketing program to really scale their business?
Yeah, so that's the importance of those surveys that we mentioned. We love hearing these success stories of companies that have participated in the domestic marketing program and they meet with some great buyers. We had a company in at America's Mart that Buc-ee's has started carrying their products in their stores at all their locations throughout the US. We have had a participant that was at America's Mart in the body and soul category and has outgrown even our program. She went on Shark Tank and won an investment. So we really like to think that we're a launch pad. We love to see those success stories coming from our members. And then again, I would say it's the right size success. So some of our companies are small manufacturers and they don't have big dreams of Target or Buc-ee's. They really just want to target the Southeast. And to me, that's just every bit as a success story as someone landing one of these big retail accounts.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, just to all of our attendees, and those that'll watch this later, these ladies are amazing. They do a wonderful job. They'll help you grow your business, and help in any way possible. But we just want to encourage you that if you are interested to go ahead, and apply, and if you guys will tell us when those applications will be opening up.
So the application will open up July 1st, and it's open for a couple of months, in September 1st, actually. So you can be on the lookout in your newsletter, for when that application opens up. We'll include it in the newsletter.
Amazing. Yeah, and so just like Liz says, stay involved with us. Look at your newsletter, look at our social account. Be sure if you're interested in even more opportunities, just to be looking at those. We do have our international SESTA webinar coming up in August. And a final reminder that this is recorded, and then the presentation and the recording will be shared in email after this. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Liz, for participating, and thank you to all of our attendees for attending with us. Awesome. Thanks, guys.